Welcome and bienvenue.
This movie, Cabaret, is a remarkable piece of work by Bob Fosse. And all of us who were a part of it, never knowing what it was going to be, I think we're blessed in many ways.
I hope the people seeing it after 25 years, that it gives as much pleasure as it was to make.
I'm just so proud I was part of that film.
Money makes the world go around, the world go around, the world go around.
The motion picture companies were all making fewer and fewer films. It was a time of turmoil.
I felt right away with Allied Artists, we were low man on the totem pole.
Manny Wolfe, who had a small company called Allied Artists, gambled $1.5 million to buy the rights to Cabaret.
Hal came one night and said, I'm thinking of doing a musical. Do you want to do it? And I said, sure. My friend John said, what are we going to call it? Nifty Nazi Follies? You know?
No one expected the stage play, the musical, to succeed. When we first played our very first performance in Boston, the Schubert Theater totally exploded. We couldn't go on with the show. And we all looked around for the very first time saying, oh, something has happened here.
Money, 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 mark a yen, a buck for a pound. That clinking, clanking, clunking sound is all that makes the world go round. It makes the world go round.
I always felt we had a winning production from the first day I bought the screen rights, because I really was risking all of Allied's net worth on that picture.
And he said, Marty, you know, I'm risking everything on this. I'm very nervous. They tell me you were once a pretty good agent. Could you agent me into this and tell me why I should do this movie and put up 50%? And for about 20 minutes, I agented like I never agented in my life. Cy, wanting to produce a film, came to see me and said, I've got a script you must read. It's called The Kicking Rabbi, and it's going to star Jerry Lewis. I read the script and shut it 4 times, and I said to a man that had won the Pulitzer Prize for How to Succeed in Business, why are you doing this? This is ludicrous. You want to produce a movie? I'll give you a movie. You're going to produce Cabaret.
Welcome in Cabaret, oh Cabaret to Cabaret.
My superior at ABC was a man named Sam Clark. We met with Fosse, and it was one hell of a terrible meeting. Bob Fosse looked at his shoes and said, I'm here, what do you want? And Sam Clark says, I understand you want to do the picture. Cabaret, he says, yes. Well, Sam, trying to get him to talk, said, well, why? I think I can make a good movie out of it. And looking at his shoes, not even looking at Sam, I said, boy, we're going into the toilet with this.
Actually, I wouldn't have done the picture without him, to tell you the truth.
He will hold me fast.
Now, before anybody did a stick of work, I did something which was quite unusual at the time. I arranged a recce to take our writer, Fosse, Cy Feuer, and myself to Germany to look at locations so that the writer, J. Preston Allen, would have an idea of what she was writing about.
Well, I was told going in that we were not going to do the play, that we were going back to the Isherwood stories, and that the guy would be homosexual or, in the movie, bisexual. And because, my God, what year was that, 1972? It was a little late in the day for all that prissy business.
Screw Maximilian!
I do.
So do I.
Well, I was an enormous fan of Kander and Ebb's work and was thrilled when I knew I was going to work with him.
I'm aware that I was extraordinarily lucky to be around Hal Prince when he hired the writers to write this extraordinary musical, and then around Bobby Fosse when he decided to make a musical of it.
Our
association in the movie, it was spelled out, was to be that any new material that needed to be written was not in the Broadway show. Fred and I were to write.
And I got this call from Marty Baum, and we had both talked about using Liza as the Sally Bowles, which is the main role in the film, and she was singing in Paris.
She came to Cy Feuer's suite, and I was there, and she was there, and she sat on the floor, cross-legged, like a child, and said, "Don't worry, fellas, I'm going to be great."
You know, when you're really young and you think in such a straight line, things are much simpler then, because you're stupid, and it's good. I thought, oh, that's okay, I'll do the movie.
She went out and did a performance that night, one of the greatest performances, live performances I've ever seen.
They came to see my show that night in Paris, and I sang Cabaret.
I still remember it vividly because my hair, and those days I had a lot more hair than now, stood up. I literally stood up on the back. I could feel this thing on the back of my head as it worked toward the front. It was incredible.
All alone in your room, come hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret. And as for me, as for me, I made my mind up back in Chelsea. When I go, I'm going like Elsie. Start by admitting from cradle to tomb.
I do believe that Bob Fosse wanted to make a brand new statement with Cabaret as a film. And as a result, I think he looked for a number of other people to play the MC. But I think a number of the powers at the studio that be insisted that he at least meet with me, and we did, and we talked about it, and we had a great time.
I said to Bob Fosse finally, well, let me put it this way, Bob. Either we hire Joel Grey or we lose you. What do you want to do? We had readings for at least 20 young English actors, and the last person to come into the room was Michael York.
The way I heard they were making a film of Cabaret was that they were actually looking for a Michael York type, which is very depressing, and I suggested to my agent that possibly I might qualify.
Michael had done a lot of movies at that time, and we were thinking of a fresher face, but somehow or other, the image of Michael being this typical Englishman, you know, against this strange background, Liza being strange, and Joel being strange, and the background being strange, and suddenly this fresh-faced Englishman.
That sweet, soft side of him, he's probably the best actor I know of, and the most underrated.
It took one reading when there wasn't any discussion. Michael York is the guy.
Proud father.
Bob Fosse had to do it his way because he's an artist, and that was a given, that we would be totally recreating the Kit Kat Club and the world of the MC.
3/4 of the time we rehearsed like crazy, and 1/4 of the time we laughed so hard, I don't know how we survived.
He would often do a take the way he wanted it, then he would take your suggestion, and we'd film it.
Bob Fosse knew very well this world of nightclubs because he himself was a kid performer in strip clubs, in burlesque, so that he knew all this underbelly very, very well. It's no mistake that he got it right.
Start the movement. Play back.
Chorus 25, take 3.
Sometimes the music told you what was going to happen. Sometimes it amplified what had just happened. And sometimes it had nothing to do with anything except the mood. The way it was placed, the way the chessboard that Fosse used, it turned out to be so interesting.
Bobby called us up and described a moment that he wanted to musicalize. And he told us exactly what he wanted her to say. He almost used the words, but, you know, maybe now that this has happened, my life is going to change, and maybe this relationship is going to work out.
Well, all the odds are they're in my favor. Something's bound to begin. It's gotta happen.
Maybe this time was a trunk song. Now, we have a very spare trunk. As a matter of fact, we hardly have a trunk. And kept it. And we therefore aced ourselves out of the possibility of an Academy Award nomination.
Liza, Fosse, and Joel, I have to include them, are really the spark plugs of that picture. I mean, we have to put aside all preparation and all stuff, because what finally counts is what do you see on the screen. And they were accountable for this. Under the guidance of Fosse, the two of them were wonderful.
Sally Bowles had to be really talented and not care. So everything she did was just a show off. And that was the choice that we ended up making. So whatever he did, I just exaggerated. You know, if it was one wiggle, he'd say more. And we found that style together. That whole toodaloo.
Bye-bye, my lieber Herr. Vorbei. Du kennst mich wohl, mein Herr. And bye-bye.
We would go to work together every day at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, sort of sleep on the way to the job and talk about what we were going to do. And when we worked on the Money Money number, Bob always wanted to see everything with full costumes, even in rehearsals. And I had to wear this old tailcoat that had been worn by hundreds of German performers. And their idea of deodorants and cleanliness are quite different from ours.
Joe was great. Joe knew this character right down to the soles of his feet, having played it as much as he had. He knew the makeup, he knew the costume. He was meticulous in his attention to all of this, because the character was such an inherent, and it was kind of an unreal. There was an unreality about it, you know, which Joel completely understood. And all Fosse had to do was just to turn on the camera and let him go.
Happy to see you, bleibe rest stay.
We had given the story quite a bit of heft in terms of the character of Max, who was sort of depraved. And in spite of the fact that homosexuality was involved, there was a certain purity about the relationship between Liza and Michael York.
There's one wonderful shot in the film that I love, because it says so much, so simply and economically. It's when the three of them are sort of dancing around, and there's a very big close-up where all the heads sort of come in and out of focus, and glances are averted, eyes are hooked, and so on. It's terrific.
My gratitude to Fosse for giving us the opportunity to be part of all this.
I sat in my seat for the opening night performance. It was a thrilling night. Practically had a nervous breakdown.
We were playing the Ziegfeld Theater, and the Ziegfeld Theater had a line completely around the block from 7th Avenue to 6th Avenue. Our offices overlooked the Ziegfeld Theater line. We didn't see the theater, but we saw the line, and we knew we had a smash hit.
The night of the Oscars, we had gotten 10 nominations, and we were up against the biggest picture that year and over many years, called The Godfather.
Oh, I was sure Al Pacino was going to win. I mean, I was convinced. I mean, it was a great performance.
We had all come down together in a big limo, and we talked about our chances of get winning possibly 2, if we were lucky. And when it started rolling, we were up to 8. We were just, we couldn't believe it.
Suddenly they said Liza Minnelli, and I looked at my father and he was crying. And in that 1 second before I stood, I looked up and I thought, this is his life, this business. And I just did him proud.
It was a fine affair, but now it's over.
That time of my life was like the inside of a diamond. It was so crystal clear.
Don't dab your eye, mine hair, or wonder why mine hair. I've always said that I was a rover. You mustn't knit your brow, you should have known by now. You'd every cause to doubt me, mine hair.
I think that the fact that people look at this film all these years later and it doesn't feel like an old film is its real strength.
Bye bye, my lieber Herr. Vorbei, du kennst mich wohl, mein Herr. And bye bye, bye bye, mein lieber Herr. Farewell, my lieber Herr. It was a fine affair, but now it's over. And though I used to care, I need the open air. You're better off without me. You'll get on without me.
Very good. Hold that one. Just one more.
Speed 238, take 2.
I am your host. Leave your troubles outside. So, life is disappointing. Forget it. In here, life is beautiful.
On stage, New York? No. On the screen, Germany. The perfect location to recapture the time and the place of one of Broadway's greatest hits.
Fremde, étranger, stranger. Glücklich zu sehen, just enchanté. Happy to see you, bleibe reste stay. Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome im Cabaret, au Cabaret, to Cabaret.
And to make Cabaret more than a musical. An international cast and crew have gathered at the authentic locales to make a significant new movie about Germany in the 1930s. The director, Bob Fosse, uses various techniques, and he takes complete advantage of shooting on location. He succeeds in recreating an era and capturing on film the feverish, divine decadence and excitement of Germany in the 1930s. The atmosphere of the picture. From the Broadway cast, he brought Joel Grey, who originated the role of Master of Ceremonies and truly masters it on the screen. Then, he cast 2 very talented and appealing young people. Liza Minnelli, internationally famous for her dynamic performances on the stage and screen, and her British co-star, Michael York. Liza, who stars as cabaret singer Sally Bowles, was singing her role in nightclubs all over the world long before she got the part in the movie.
There was a Sally Bowles. There's really a Sally Bowles. And she never really wore anything that anybody else wore. She did all sorts of strange things. She just wore what she wanted to, what she liked. I wanted to do this for so long.
Visita mi canal.
Take 2. Playback.
At the window. Who's there? Hunger. See how love flies out the door. Money makes over all around over, all around over. Money makes over all around the blinking, glancing flowers.
Some directors have a preconceived idea of how they want a role to be played, but Fosse works with images that the actor can relate to creatively.
The director is the man who really has the overall view. He's a wonderful director. He knows exactly what he wants, and he helps you arrive at it.
When you have a cast such as this one, an American playing an American, an Englishman playing an Englishman, and Germans playing Germans, the different national types and temperaments working together on location in Germany certainly provide worldwide interest. Adding to the realism is Joel Grey. Joel really took the trouble to learn an authentic German accent, and with slicked down hair and outlandish makeup, he is the master of ceremonies.
I think, the director, Bob Fosse, has succeeded remarkably in capturing this strange mixture of decadence, excitement.
Under Bob Fosse's watchful eye, Liza sings the film's title song, echoing the philosophy of the times. When you really get into it, Cabaret is more than a musical.
What good is sitting all alone in your room? Come, hear the music play. Life is a cabaret, old chum. Come to the cabaret. And as for me, I made my mind up back in Chelsea. When I go, I'm going like Elsie. Start by admitting from cradle to tomb, it isn't that long a stay. Life is a cabaret, old chum. It's only a cabaret, old chum. And I love a
Tomorrow Belongs to Me is the only number that did not happen in the Kit Kat Club. The scene was in a beer garden, which we created outside of Munich in the countryside, and populated with the country people thereabout. We gathered about 150 of them and set them up at these tables, and they were all having beer and so forth, the typical beer garden atmosphere. And there was a little Oompa band, a little German band of three, an accordion and euphonium and whatever, clarinet, little Oompa arrangement. And this angelic boy, if you all remember this scene, he looked like a Boy Scout. He must have been about 13 years old. He had on this complete Boy Scout uniform, except that on his arm was a Nazi insignia. And this beautiful boy sang the song "Tomorrow Belongs to Me," which is really a hymn to Nazism. And he's joined by this entire group, the 150 people at the beer garden, who slowly transformed this thing into a kind of a horrifying, aggressive piece of terrifying material.
The scene where where I go to visit her, and she's telling me that Fritz pounced, and it sort of attacked her, which had been Sally's idea in the first place. When we did Maurice's close-up, Bobby said to me, "I want you to be very serious. I want you to really listen to her and pull it out of her. A real friend." I said, "All right." So, I'm sitting and I'm listening. I said, "That's terrible." "Oh, well, God, he pounced." Whatever. And it was all very serious. Now we turn around to do my part. And I do it just like that. And he said, "Where's the character?" I said, "Well, I thought," he said, "that was for her benefit."
Tus trailers.
Now,
Visita mi canal.
let's just to be Sally again, okay? What I didn't realize was the impact that it would have on fashion. I mean, I cut my hair in that point without even asking Bobby. it just seemed the right thing to do. And Joel said, "What about? I saw a picture of." We looked at this picture together. I said, "Yeah, but I don't like I like the point." He said, "Well, try that." So I did. Went over and dyed it a little bit darker, and knocked on Bob's door. He lived across the hall from me. He and Gwen. I said, "How do you like it?" He said, "Thank God I do. What have you done?" I said, "Well, don't you think it looks like Sally?" He said, "Yes." And then he just started to laugh, you know. He said, "What else do you have in mind?" And then I showed him I designed the look, and a wonderful makeup artist who's now quite famous, Christina Smith, it was her first she sent me off with a little box of makeup. That's what I went to Germany with. Couldn't afford her, but I could afford the box of makeup. So I did it all myself, you know. And I had no idea, but, you know, like Alice Cooper, who I'm friends with, said, "My whole career is based on your movie." He said, "It started me." David Bowie said something like that to me, the impact that it had on him. The impact that it had on the American look changed. It changed with Bonnie and Clyde, too. I mean, it was that same thing. Suddenly everybody's wearing eyelashes, you know, and those, you know, because I just tried to figure out some look for her, and I'd worked on it with my own father. You know, and he'd showed me all these pictures of Louise Guam, and not only Louise Brooke, but wonderful, wonderful people I'd never even heard of, you know. And I'd sort of worked it out with him. I had some help from home. I always learned from his eyes. I learned the dances by watching his face. I knew I'd get the steps because I was a dancer, but why was he doing them? Why was he moving the air in such a way with his body? What was it coming from? Because he was terribly intelligent. There was always thought behind each step. It wasn't just a series of vroom, vroom, vroom. There was you'd notice that he tilted his head in a certain way. So it used to amaze him that I would be watching his face when he was showing me the step. And finally he said, "What are you looking for?" I said, "Where it comes from." And he just started to laugh.
I remember when the show was being promoted. And David Frost had a show in New York at the time, and I remember Liza, Joel, and I were on it. Of course, we were, you know, talking up a storm, and David, who's an old friend of mine, I should have known better, said, "You know, what a pity." He said, "I hear you don't get to sing in the movie," and I said, because I fell hook, line and sinker for this. I said, "Yes, David, what a pity. I would have loved it," etc., etc., etc. He said, "Well, don't worry," he said, "here's your chance now." And I looked behind me, I saw this curtain go up, and there was a full-piece orchestra playing songs from the show that Brian Roberts had sang. And this was on live television. I felt my heart sink, and that the brain raced. What do you do? Do you kind of make for the exit door immediately? Or what do you do? And I mean, because you know that when people who go on these shows and they're asked to, you know, improvise, they say, "Oh, shall I? Are you sure?" You know that they've been rehearsing for the last month. So I remember getting David to sing along with me. Some scenes were almost stylized in their setting. I know that Bob Fosse was very much fascinated, maybe influenced by the works of Otto Dix and George Gross. And I remember there's one scene that where people were actually posing. When it's cut together, it's almost subliminal, so it doesn't look stylized. But that's how it was set up. And I remember thinking at the time, this is really risky. If you pull this off, that's, you know, my hat's off to you. One thing which I loved also, we all went to see the dailies, the rushes, and which was very much part of the creative process. So, you know, he'd say at the screening, "There, you see, it doesn't work because of so-and-so and so-and-so." Or on certain and very red letter days, he would say, "Yes," he said, you're right. You're absolutely right. We'll take yours." And you felt, this is wonderful. There's a wonderful accident in the film, in a tea party scene, where Marisa, playing Natalia Landau, arrives for her English lessons, and Sally's there, of course. And I pass her a sandwich, and totally unplanned, it flew off the plate into her lap, and her reaction is an absolute joy, and of course it's that reaction that's in the film.
We worked under very difficult circumstances. There was Bob Fosse had just come off of Sweet Charity, and they were not anxious to give him a lot of money, so I think we were all forced to work in a very intense, tiny way, like actors who have to put a show on in a barn. Everybody did everything. There was a kind of family and passion about what we were doing. And I think in many ways, those limitations about money and the fact that we were not doing something that everybody was expecting to be successful, I think worked in our behalf. As a Jew, I was very fearful of going to Germany. I never wanted to go there. And I remember I got off the airplane, Lufthansa, and I thought I was fine. And I was excited about making this project, and I thought, I'll be open to this experience. And I thought it was fine, and I got off the airplane, and I stood for the first time on German ground, and I started to sob. I was totally caught unawares. And I'm certain that it's that collective memory of the people of my life and of my people and my past. All that loss came up welling inside of me. And it was every time I heard those sirens go, I would awake. Well, in the very first place, on the stage, I remembered a dreadful, second-rate, fourth-rate, fifth-rate, whatever he was, a comedian that I saw once, and I said, that guy is the worst, sleaziest, classlessest performer I've ever seen. And one day I was trying to find this character, and I thought of this guy, and I did an imitation of him, and it was horrible to do. And I finished it, and Hal Prince came over to me and said, that's it.
The night of the Oscars, we had gotten 10 nominations. And we were up against the biggest picture commercially that year and over many years, called The Godfather. And they, of course, were the odds-on favorite. Godfather had gotten 11 nominations. And I invited everybody. We had a little get-together at my suite at the Beverly Hills Hotel before we went to the Oscars, and Bob was there and the others were there. But this was my birthday. It was March 27th. And I felt that there was no way that I was not going to be rewarded on my birthday. Not only that, but we started this picture in 1972, and if you take 72 and reverse it, it's also 27. So I felt all the numbers were in my favor. I still am amazed how up-to-date, how wonderful, how timely, and how beautifully crafted it is. It's still a feeling of wonderment on my part, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am that I was, part of that whole thing, and that I had the guts at the time to stick our neck out and buy those rights when nobody else wanted them.
Oh, I thought it was terrible. Everything they told me to ignore, I paid very strict attention to. They made a speech. They said there'll be black lines going across this. Ignore that. This overdubbing has not been done, so you'll see a beer truck passing by, but there won't be any sound, but eventually, of course, there will be of cobblestones or whatever, and there'll be voiceover dialogue between Sally and Cliff, and you'll hear that, and that happened, and then the black lines came across, and she'll put her hand down on a phonograph as if she's playing it, but you won't hear the music. And so the black line came across, and I said, oh, look, there's a black line. And when there was no speak, I said, wow, it's awful quiet when, this beer truck passed by. And I said, how can you put a record on and then not hear it? I looked at the picture entirely the wrong way, and I disregarded everything I was told to. The second time I saw it with Liza, and then she had her problems with it too. I guess seeing yourself on the screen must be an awesome experience. And I think it was at the Ziegfeld Theater, which is a huge place, and we were in the last row. And she was terrified by it. She thought it was terrifying. And then the third time, I kind of started to like it. And of course, all the black lines went away, and there was sound. And when she put her finger onto a record, I did hear the record, and I began to see it was really kind of artistic and beautiful, the movie.
I had seen the Broadway show long before I was approached about doing a film. When Bob Fosse and Cy Fura came to me originally, the very first thing was, we don't want to do, we want to go back to the book. We don't want to do the play. I asked them to bring in Hugh. I knew that Hugh could do it and would be easy to work with. And I didn't think Hugh would kill my baby, and he didn't.
Hal had bought, as I recall this, Hal had the rights to the Berlin stories of Christopher Isherwood, and he had set Joe Mastroff to work to start creating a narrative, and then he called Fred and me in, and then for a long time the four of us sat around and talked and talked and talked and talked and played what if this, what if he throws a rock through the window, what if she has an abortion, what if this has happened in a lot of shows since, and it's a wonderful way to work where you just let your imagination run free. And eventually, by the time we finished playing What If, we were all working on the same project rather than going in 4 different directions. I sat in my seat for the opening night performance, and I fell asleep in the middle of the first act. I remember exactly the scene too, and I remember waking up in the middle of the scene thinking, is this still going on? And then the act ended, and I stood up, and it was like somebody had poured ice cubes down my back. I guess I had withdrawn defensively so much that I didn't have any feelings. Immediately after that, I practically had a nervous breakdown. It was a thrilling night. One of us took the bus down to see if there were, and saw the lines in front of the theater and took a cab back. It was a symbolic gesture.
Here's what happened. In the summer of 1971, ABC decided to get out of the motion picture business. They were being sued by the Motion Picture Association. They were being sued by the government, antitrust, and they decided to call a halt to the whole thing. So here I had Straw Dogs in post-production, Cabaret in post-production, Junior Bonner in post-production, and Lovers Not the Strangers in post-production, and I knew that they were going out of business. And they agreed, even though I had a contract, they could have just paid me a salary and let me sit home. They agreed to let me keep the office running till I got those pictures finished. And I'll never forget this. It was a hot July day when I took the director's cut to New York, Fosse's cut, to run it for Manny Wolfe and all of his executives. It was the first time he saw the picture. He had been over during production to say hello and shake hands and go on the set and look at a few dailies, but he wasn't really involved. But now he saw, and every nickel he's got in the world is riding on that film. And the ABC executives were there. And as I said, it was a very hot day and the air conditioning wasn't too good in the screening room that we chose. And the picture was a bomb. It didn't work. And they were petrified. Manny Wolfe was perspiring. What are we going to do? And I said, here's what we're going to do. I said, Bob Fosse was sitting there. I said, Bob, it doesn't work. Now, forgetting that we have final cut, which we did by contract. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the final cut. going to go back to California. We're all going to go back to California. We're going to go into an editing room, and we're going to go reel by reel. There's going to be Lou Rackmill, who was then head of below-the-line production and a very knowledgeable man about film, who worked for me, and Bob Fosse, and Cy Feuer, and we're going to go reel by reel. And if anybody sees something that bothers them, let them speak up. The lights will go up. It was a rock and roll, they call it, where you can stop the movie and go back and forward. And let the individual who's bothered by something state his case. If there are objections to what he says, let me hear them. But I'm going to make the final decision. I have the final cut. I'm going to make the final decision. But every person in that room is going to have a chance to speak. And that's what we did. We went back to Los Angeles, and it took 4 weeks to go through the whole film, reel by reel, shot by shot, making changes. Fosse got hot under the collar at times. Feuer got hot under the collar at times. Rackmill got hot under the collar at times. I kept my calm because I knew that I had the final decision to make, and I made decision after decision after decision. It was my finest moment in the business, where I was able to bring something to the process of filmmaking. The fondest memory I had was the screening that took place in Westwood prior to the opening, where the audience was 90% professional people. And I happened to sit next to Christopher Isherwood, who I never met, but he had been pointed out to me. He didn't know who I was. He was sitting with another gentleman. And I'm watching the movie. To the greatest response of any performance of that movie anywhere was that night in Westwood. And when the lights went up, I was watching Isherwood, and he turned to the man next to him, and his response was, "What a goddamn lie. I never slept with a woman in my life." And that was the moment where I said, we transcended what Christopher Isherwood would have done with this movie and went to another plateau. But no matter how great, the movie played so brilliantly, I thought he would say, "Oh, what they've done with my movie, I'm so thrilled." His only comment was that we lied. He never slept with a woman. Yes, I read in the newspapers about a year ago that the Smithsonian Institute had decided to take 10 films that were made since films began and treat them so that they would be memorialized forever, that they would be there as witnesses that they were made. And of the 10 films, Cabaret was one of them.